Okay, so today I'm going to show how I created these two semi-abstract landscape paintings using acrylic paint. I used two very slightly different methods for these two paintings because the one on the left I wet the whole paper first, and the one on the right I added the water after applying the paint, initially anyway. Now I have a slight preference for one on the left, and I think this probably is as a result of the methods that I used. So the reason why I'm showing two methods is that I think it's interesting so that you really understand, well, one, that there are always different ways to do things, and also it can give an understanding of why one method might work better than another one. Okay, so here's a different shot of the painting on the left, and this is the first one I did. I'm going to use Winsor & Newton acrylic paints, mixing Paynes grey and Cobalt blue. Okay, so getting started, I've got one I previously did for reference with these colours, although this one I'm going to make the main part of the image more central, and I'm not going to take the sides. I've just got a few of these mats which I can use to work out how I'm going to ultimately crop my painting. Okay, so I'm getting my paints ready now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the setup. So I've got Archer's cold pressed fine grain paper, and I've got 2 glasses of water, and I've also got a large flat brush, and I'm going to use probably 2 different sized brushes, one specifically for acrylic and one actually that's actually more for watercolour, which is a softer brush than the acrylic brush. Okay, so now I've got my paint, I'm going to get a little bit of water and I'm just going to really mix them really well so that the colour doesn't separate once it's on the paper. Okay, so now I'm going to get my large flat brush, which I've really made sure that it's super clean and doesn't have any dust on, because that can get into the paint and be really annoying. So if it's been sitting around for a while, then yes, give it a really good rinse before you use it. And I'm just covering the whole paper with water. I'm not soaking it, but I'm making sure that it's evenly spread. Okay, so now it's time to get that paint on. I'm using the acrylic brush. It's a flat brush, and I'm just going to put a strip across the middle. Now, the video's jumped a bit here because I was concentrating so hard that I leaned right forward and covered the camera. But as you can see, you add this strip in the middle, and then you get this sort of feathered effect where the paint is pulled across the paper where the water is. And then you just got to kind of work with it really. Like, my aim is to have a darker sort of mass in the middle, and then getting progressively lighter towards the top and the bottom. I want the overall look to be very horizontal, but I don't want it to be perfect, so I'm trying to work left to right, but also maybe add a bit of shape to that horizontal line to give like a feeling of, you know, mountains or a landmass or something. And you can't see my water or my paint, but when I apply paint to, say, like here at the top, then I'm using a bit more watery paint so that I can keep this gradation of tones. Okay, so I'm getting my frame now just to see what this looks like, and I'm getting kind of happy with it, but I want to put some darker again in the middle. And it's always a bit tricky with acrylic paint, I find, because it can kind of pull away when you try to add more paint over the wet paint. Okay, so here I'm just kind of repeating the process really, and I'm just going to put the music up for this bit. Okay, so it's looking okay, but I do want to add a bit more of a darker tone in the middle. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get the watercolour brush because it's softer and I find that it doesn't pull away the paint so much. I'm applying it very lightly because the acrylic brush tends to be a bit hard and it can scrape away the paint as you use it. Okay, so now I'm going back to the acrylic brush and I'm just going to use it to make the gradation of that central tone a bit softer. But it's getting there now, and I'm just going to speed this up a bit and put some music on while I finish it off. Okay, so there you go, this one's done. I'm going to put it aside to dry and get started on the next one. I'm just going to get everything ready. I'm going to change my water and I'm going to add a bit more paint so that I don't run out halfway through the painting. Okay, so I'm ready now. I'm going to get started. Now for this one I'm not going to wet the paper. I'm going to see what happens if I put the paint on first and then use sort of a very watery brush or very watery paint to kind of pull that paint up afterwards, which is slightly different to what I did before. Okay, so unfortunately exactly the same thing happened. I leaned right forward because I was concentrating so hard and I covered the camera. But what you can see when I add that strip of colour, you get a much harder edge, and then I use the brush with water on the brush to kind of soften that edge. And you do have to work fairly quickly because unlike watercolour, once the acrylic paint dries, it's quite hard to get that edge to soften. Now here I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm using the softer watercolour brush to put the darker paint in the middle, and I'm just putting it on really lightly so that it doesn't scrape away the paint underneath. Okay, so now I'm going to speed this film up a bit and I'm going to put some music on while I finish the painting off. Okay, so this is finished now, and I'm going to put it aside to dry, and then I'll compare these two paintings that I've done. Okay, so they're both dry now. This is the first one on the right, is the second one that I did, and this one on the left is the first one I did where I wet the paper. Now, like I said at the beginning, I have a slight preference for the one on the left because if you look at the top and the bottom, there's more white paper, and I think this just gives a nice variety of tones within the paper because you've got the really dark in the centre and then you've got the almost white paper at the top and bottom. And I've got these frames, so I'm just going to put them over to see how I might want to crop them eventually. Actually, I think that these could probably be cropped a bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is get a bigger crop and see what that looks like, put it over the top. Now that might work, although it's probably a little bit too big. I'll try it on the other one. It looks okay, but I think the area on the right needs to be covered. So what you can do, if you don't have a frame the exact size you want, you can just use other frames or other bits of card to just cover it to see how you might crop it. And then what I would do is I would then measure this cutouts and get a frame made up of that size. But anyway, for now I'm just going to put this smaller frame on. Okay, so going back to my two paintings and a quick recap. The one on the left, I wet the paper before I started painting, and the one on the right, I applied the paint in the middle and then use a very wet brush to sort of drag the paint upwards. I think the one on the left has turned out, you could say, a bit more successfully, which, as I said before, I think is due to the fact that there's a greater variety of tones. So it's very dark in the middle, and then towards the top and the bottom it's almost the white paper. I think this has probably happened because when you apply the water afterwards, you end up working into the painting a bit more, and I think that you end up covering more of the surface in the paint. And rather than the colour getting pulled up by the effect of the wet paper, you're sort of pushing the paint across the surface, and I think that gives a more even tone. So overall, I would say if you're going to use this method, then I would probably wet the paper first. But you know, on the other hand, I have done some paintings that have turned out very well by using the second method. So it really is just a case of trial and error and working out what you like and what works for you. Okay, so I've used acrylic for these paintings, watered down, and it becomes almost like watercolour, but there are differences between using acrylic like this and watercolour paint. And I have done quite a similar demonstration using watercolour paint. So if you're interested, you can look in the description and click on the link to that YouTube video. And then the other thing is that you might find that you need to flatten your paper afterwards. You can do this by spraying the back of the paper and then putting it under some heavy books, or you can do this using spraying the back and then stretching it using tape. And again, I do have a video showing this method for flattening paper, so I'll put both the links for those videos in my description. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this demonstration. I hope you found it helpful, and if you liked it, please hit the like button, and if you want to see similar videos, then please hit subscribe to my channel. Okay, thank you. Bye.